Now, let's talk about the Philippine standards pagdating sa license to operate a laboratory. So, under that, you can find the guidelines in Administrative Order 2007-0027 or the revised rules and regulation governing the licensure and regulation of clinical lab in the Philippines. So, yung mga succeeding information na discuss ko na during the prelim, di ba? Classification of clinical laboratories. So, pwedeng by ownership, by function that I've discussed last time. Institutional character, of course. Service capability, na-discuss ko na rin last time yan. Yan. And of course, the special clinical lab, na-discuss ko na last time. So, we're done with that. Pahapiaw na lang. Okay? Now, under the specific guidelines, number 1 is the human resource. So, for the human resource, you need the following. You need a pathologist. You need a head of the lab. Adequate number of staff, and that is proportion to workload. This is actually very important. Kasi, when you're going to hire your staff, dapat alam mo, ilan ba yung expected workload mo dyan sa laboratory. Of course, dapat alam mo rin yung type of services you're going to offer. Okay? For example, marami kang test that is being offered in your laboratory. So, yung clinical chemistry testing mo kompleto, di ba? So, definitely, maraming work na gagawin sa lab. So, kapag maraming work na gagawin sa lab, dapat medyo marami ka rin staff na kailangan. Okay? So, proportion siya dapat sa workload. Kasi nga naman, lahat ng laboratory, meron silang tinatawag na standard turnaround time. When you say standard turnaround time, gaano ba katagal makapag-release ng results ang isang laboratory? So, pagkakuha ng blood sa pasyente, gaano katagal maghihintay si pasyente bago niya makuha yung kanyang result? And take note that in emergency cases, your results must be released at least less than 1 hour. Kung kaya mo ng 5 minutes, good, right? And of course, you're only going to meet that if your lab has an adequate number of staff or personnel. So, another thing that you're going to consider is the staff development. So, lahat ng mga training that is being needed by your staff, the owner of the lab must provide that. So, dapat bayaran mo yung mga training na kailangan nila. So, part din yan. Another thing is equipment. Of course, dapat lahat ng equipment mo should be available local in the Philippines, di ba? Bakit? Kasi mahirap mag-maintain. Kung bibili ka ng mga machine na hindi naman siya available in the Philippines, then yung mga maintenance materials na yan ay mahirap din makuha, definitely, kasi magagaling pa yan sa abroad. And of course, the machine must be operational. To make sure that operational ang machine, dapat yung machine must undergo calibration and preventive maintenance, and of course, repair if necessary. So, ano ba yung calibration na yan? Okay, for example, meron kang machine for testing of blood glucose, 'di ba? So, you must be able to test if the machine is actually testing the blood glucose properly. Yung results ba ay tama? So, paano mo malalaman yon? You can perform a calibration step. So, kapag calibration step, ang ginagawa mo is meron kang specimen na nanggaling mismo sa company. Kumbaga, hindi lang siya yung specimen lang nakukuha mo dyan sa pasyente. Standard specimen siya na meron siyang standard value. Okay? That is what you call the controls. So, meron kang positive control. Kapag, meron kang control na high. Kapag high, yung control na yon, ibig sabihin noon, yung magiging expected result mo dapat high. So, kapag yung specimen na yon na high, ay nilagay mo sa machine na yan, dapat ang lalabas na result ng glucose is high as well, matataas. Kasi, you're going to calibrate if the machine is able to read high results. Okay? And then, meron ka rin isang specimen pa rin that are labeled as normal. So, kapag normal, ibig sabihin yan, yung result dapat ng machine mo should be in normal range ng blood glucose. So, kapag pinasok ko yung specimen na yon, nag-test yung machine, dapat ang results ay normal. And then, meron ka ring control na low. Yung low naman, of course, low, ibig sabihin noon, yung expected result should be low. So, kapag pinasok ko yung specimen sa machine at nag-run yung machine, dapat yung result ng blood glucose niya is low. Okay? So, kumbaga, you're going to test if the machine can read low results, high results, and normal results. So, that is an example of a calibration. And then, hindi lang yun, meron ka pang tinatawag ng mga calibration curve. Dapat pasok siya sa standard. And then, actually, the discussion regarding calibration will be done next week. So, medyo mahaba-haba siya na discussion. Okay? Yung preventive maintenance naman, again, sabi ko nga kanina, kapag preventive maintenance, meron kang regular na person from the company that gives you the machine to regularly check up on the machine. Tinitignan siya kung well functioning pa ba siya. Tinitignan yung mga makina niya, kung okay pa ba, okay, and then tinitignan din yung results ng calibration control mo. And of course, repair program kapag meron ka mga breakdown ng machine. And ito yung pinaka-importante. What is your contingency plan in case of equipment breakdowns? This is actually very important pagdating sa mga hospital-based laboratory, 'di ba? Kasi nga naman sa ospital, merong ER. And as we all know, kapag ER case, dapat nga 5 minutes lang, meron na talagang results na ilalabas si machine. So, anong gagawin mo kapag nasa ospital ka, tapos yung machine mo ay nasira? Biglang nasira talaga siya, and then wala nang ibang machine for that, 'di ba? Dapat meron kang contingency plan. So, saan mo dadalhin yung specimen? So, usually yung mga lab sa ospital, merong silang mga MOA or Memorandum of Agreement with other hospitals. Na, for example, nasira yung machine nila. So, meron silang agreement sa pinakamalapit na ospital that will accept their specimen. Okay, so dito dadalhin yung specimen kapag nasira yung equipment natin. Okay, so ganon. That's what you call the contingency plan. Kasi importante pa rin that the hospital must be able to meet the standard turnaround time. So dapat maglalabas ka pa rin ng resulta sa specific time that you are expected to. Lalo na kapag ER cases. Now, glassware, reagent and supplies, of course, dapat meron kang inventory, control of the reagent, glassware, and supplies, and all of them must be stored under required conditions. So, when you say required conditions, yung mga reagent kasi, pagdating sa kanilang packaging, may nakalagay dyan kung saan ba ang storage temperature niya. Kapag nakalagay dyan is 4 degrees Celsius, dapat sa ref, di ba? Kapag nakalagay is negative, dapat sa freezer. Kapag nakalagay dyan is room temperature, dapat sa room temperature lang, sa mga cabinet lang. So, dapat meron kang provision sa storage ng mga reagents and ng mga reagents mo. Reagents and supplies. Definitely, dapat meron kang freezer, meron kang ref, and meron ka rin mga cabinet para doon sa mga kailangan lang under room temperature. Importante yan. And of course, proper storage pa rin, di ba? Okay. Another thing is admin policies and procedure. So, when you say admin policies and procedure, sabi ko nga last time, kapag policy, meron kang printed document, written document, stating ano ba yung mga policy and procedure ng isang laboratory. So, under din dito ang standard operating procedures nyo. So, technical procedures, these are documented technical procedure in this section of the lab. When you say technical procedure, ito yung mga procedure kung paano gawin yung test. Okay, for example, glucose testing, di ba? Procedure number 1, collect the blood. Procedure number 2, centrifuge, etc. Diba? Those are example of technical procedure. Kapag technical procedure, specific siya sa certain type of test. Ano ba yung step-by-step procedure para gawin yung test? Okay? Now, for the quality assurance program, so dapat meron kang dalawang quality assurance program. So, in the Philippines, dalawa ang required talaga, internal and external quality assurance program. When you say internal quality assurance program, it means that every day, you are calibrating the machine and then you're performing quality control check. Okay? Inside the laboratory. So, dapat yung mga machine mo, sinecheck mo siya with your controls and then yung mga results niya ay pasok doon sa expected result. However, kapag external naman, so kapag external is merong isang institution na magpapadala sa iyo ng mga specimen. Okay? And then yung specimen na yon, you're going to test that in your laboratory and then dapat pareho kayo ng resulta nung external institution na yon. 'Di ba? Kunyari, yung pinadala niya specimen sa'yo, matataas ang result ng blood glucose. Dapat kapag nag-test ka sa laboratory mo, matataas din yung result ng blood glucose. And of course, you do not know kung ano ba yung expected result na yun. Kaya nga tinawag na quality control check eh. 'Di ba? Kasi it's a mystery. So, darating yung specimen, hindi mo alam kung ano talaga yung tamang sagot. Hindi mo alam kung ano yung dapat na result niya. And then, kapag nag-feed ka, nilagay mo siya sa machine, yung specimen na yon, tapos yung machine, binasa na siya, kung ano yung result doon, ilalabas mo na. And then, ipapadala mo doon sa external institution. And then, kapag binigyan mo na sa kanila result mo, bapadala nila kung ano ba yung tamang sagot. Ganun siya. So, dapat pareho kayo na sagot. Kung mataas sa kanila, dapat mataas din sa inyo. Okay? That is an example of an external quality control program. So, Again, internal quality assurance, internal quality control, and internal quality assurance, continuous quality improvement program, and participation in external quality assurance program. Now, for the communication of records, so ano ba yung process kung paano ka mag-release ng results? And hindi lang yan releasing, all about storage din ng results. Kasi may mga laboratory na high-tech na ngayon na ang gagawin nila is i-email na lang nila yung result. That's, example of that is the practice being done in St. Luke's, diba? St. Luke's Hospital, dito sa Manila. I'm not sure sa Pampanga kung may mga ganun bang services na ini-email na lang yung results. So, dapat meron kang procedure kung paano ba ang releasing ng results. So, is it a routine or stat procedure? O laboratory, kapag routine, ibig sabihin noon is the result must be released within the day. Okay? Kapag naman stat procedure, it must be resolved within 1 hour or less than 1 hour. All laboratory reports shall bear the name of the and facsimile signature of the pathologist who shall be accountable for the liability results. So, sabi ko nga last time, dapat meron ka pathologist kasi yung pathologist na yon, siya yung nag-check na mga results nyo bago ilabas. So, before you release the result, make sure na na-check din siya ng pathologist. Okay? Again, reports. Kapag reports, meron siyang name and signature of the RMT. So, sino ba yung RMT na gumawa ng testing? So, liable ka kasi. Kapag ikaw nag-release ka ng result at nandun yung pangalan mo at yung resulta mo ay mali, pwede kang idemanda. Okay, ito yung tatawag natin na liability and accountability. So, importante dyan that when you release a results and then you sign your name, make sure that the results are accurate and precise. Electronic signatures, reporting of workload, quality control, inventory control, work schedule and assignment. So it is also part of the records keeping. Incident report, adverse events and handling and complaints. Yung mga incident report na yan, these are being done kapag nagkaroon ka ng case sa laboratory. So for example, naglabas ka ng resulta, tapos nagreklamo yung pasyente kasi nga hindi naman ganun yung result niya. So naglabas ka ng resulta, ang pangalan is Isabel de Guzman. Pero yung pangalan ng pasyente is Isabel de la Cruz, 'di ba? So binigay mo de Guzman, pero siya talaga si de la Cruz. So that is an incident report kasi kanino bang resulta tong binibigay mo sa akin? Okay? So possible kasi nagkaroon ng switching ng specimen or nagkaroon lang ng typographical error. 'Di ba? So, kung typo error lang, okay. Pero what if nagkaroon ka ng switching ng specimen, 'di ba? Tapos namali ng bigay ng gamot yung doktor, etc. So liable ka. Liable ka doon. So dapat gagawa mo ng incident report yan, ano ba yung nangyari and what are the different things that you're going to do to avoid those circumstances again. So all of that must be recorded properly. And of course, retention of laboratory records. Gaano ba katagal tinatago ang laboratory records? Gaano nga ba katagal? It depends on the type of service that you're actually giving in the lab. So, the record can be stored at least 2 years or up to 20 years. Okay, ganun katagal. Depende yan. Depende yan kung ano ba yung mga services. Lalo na kapag sa pathology laboratory, so usually mga 20 years. Yan, pati nga yung specimen hindi siya tinatapon. Okay, yun. Another thing is the physical facilities and work environment. So, ano ba yung physical lab na yan? So, of course, the clinical lab shall conform to all applicable local and national regulations for the construction, renovation, maintenance, and repair of the clinical lab. So, yung kanyang facility mismo dapat at par sa recommended standard of the government. So, of course, dapat meron siyang space for the conduct of activities. So, yung mga space na yan, meron siyang specific na sukat. Depende yan sa type of lab that you're going to offer. Now, the lab should be well ventilated, lighted, clean, and safe, and functional. And then, there should be a program of proper maintenance and monitoring of physical plant and facilities. When you say proper maintenance mismo nung lab, it pertains to the building itself. Okay? Kasi, another thing is, there shall be procedure for the proper disposal of waste and hazardous substances. So, yung mga hospital waste, yung mga laboratory waste, hindi yan basta-basta na nang tinatapon sa basura. Usually, meron ka dapat company na meron kang agreement that will actually go in and take your medical waste. Okay? So, hindi yan do sa basura lang na dumadaan. 'Di ba? Meron talagang kumpanya na pupunta sa laboratory mo para kunin yung mga medical waste. Ito sila yung mga nagtatapon yan properly. And then there shall be policy guidelines on laboratory biosafety and biosecurity. Now, for the referral of examination outside the clinical lab, when a laboratory examination are referred to and provided by the outside laboratory, the head of the referring clinical lab shall obtain assurance of the quality services provided through a MOA. So, ito yung sabi ko last time na, ay kanina na kapag, let's say, nasira yung machine mo, and then hindi available yung test. So, dapat meron kang isa pang lab na pwedeng pagdalhan. So, usually, meron kayo tinatawag na MOA or Memorandum of Agreement. And then, part ng agreement na yon is ensuring that the results that you're going to get from this laboratory is still accurate and precise. Okay? So, mapagkakatiwalaan pa rin ng laboratory. So, ano ba yung mga requirements na kailangan para makapag-construct ka ng isang laboratory and license to operate? Of course, application for a new license. So, you must have a duly notarized application form or petition to establish, operate, maintain a clinical laboratory shall be filled by the owner or his duly authorized representative at the Bureau of Health Facilities and Services. Now, for the fees, of course, there is a license fee. It is non-refundable. And then all the fees shall follow the current prescribed schedule of fees to the Department of Health. So DOH ang merong prescribed ng fees kung magkano ba dapat yung fee for the application of the license to operate. So yung procedure, first, the applicants can acquire the prescribed application form for LTO form at this website. So you have www.doh.gov.ph. Okay, so again, yung license to operate na yon, nagagaling siya sa Bureau of Health Facilities. And another thing is sa Center for Health and Development. Okay, so sila yung mga merong jurisdiction pagdating sa applicants of clinical laboratory. So the accomplished form, all together with the necessary attachment, is to be submitted to the CHD that has jurisdiction over the existing proposed clinical laboratory. Then the applicant shall be required to pay a non-refundable application fee for license to operate upon submission of the accomplished form. So the Center for Health Development, they have jurisdiction over the existing or proposed clinical lab, shall conduct inspection. So before you're able to be given a license, dapat yung lab mo should be inspected by the government. So, ano ba yung meron sa inspection na yun? Of course, part ng inspection na yan is the physical facility itself together with your equipment, also the staff. Okay? So, as provided for under this order and the one-stop shop licensure system for hospital. When you say one-stop shop licensure system for hospital, it means that kapag yung hospital is applying for a license to operate, kasama na rin yung laboratory. Okay? However, kapag ikaw ay hiwalay, so hindi ka part ng hospital, kailangan mo mag-apply separate. Pero kapag part ka ng hospital, yung license to operate ng lab na yan, under na siya sa license to operate ng hospital. Kaya tinawag na one-stop shop licensure system for hospitals. Now, for the monitoring naman, so importante ang monitoring ng mga laboratory kasi nga naman dapat the government must make sure that the laboratory is still offering the services that is at par to the standards of the Philippines. So, all clinical labs shall be monitored regularly. So, sino ba yung in charge dyan? So, you have the Bureau of Health Facilities and Services or the Center for Health Development Director is the authorized representative shall monitor clinical lab through monitoring visit to the lab at any reasonable time. So, meron tayong tinatawag na inspection. Nag-i-inspect sila. Yung inspection nila, pwede siyang scheduled, pwede rin na surprised. Okay, surprise visit na bigla na lang darating dyan. Yung taga government, yung taga DOH or taga CHD or BHS or BHFS, and then titingnan nila yung laboratory mo. Okay, bigla na lang silang pupunta doon for the visit. Another thing is, all clinical labs shall ensure that all lab records, premises, and facilities are made available. So, kapag nagpunta sila doon, pwede na lang tignan yung mga laboratory results mo, yung mga quality control results. Usually, tinitingnan lang nila is the calibration records. Calibration records, preventive maintenance records. Okay? Hindi sila masyado na sa mga patient records kasi nga naman, that is confidential. Kumbaga sa patient record lang, ang titingnan lang nila dyan is how you store the record. Paano ba yung safekeeping ng record? Paano ba yung releasing ng record? More on your process and procedure inside the laboratory. Okay? And then, of course, yung mga result ng calibration mo, result of your quality control, and of course, results of your preventive maintenance and records of repair. Okay? Yun ang kanya tinitingnan. All clinical lab, a notice of violation for non-compliant clinical lab shall be issued immediately after monitoring the clinical lab. So, kapag may nakita yung taga-government na meron kang ginagawa doon na hindi at par sa standard, pwede kang bigyan agad-agad ng notice of violation or for non-compliance. The CHD concerned shall submit a quarterly summary of the violations to the Bureau of Health Facilities and Services, stating the name of the clinical lab location, is corresponding violation, and the course of action taken. So, dapat kasi, for example, meron ka talagang violation na extreme talaga, then the government can actually stop you from operating. Pwede ka nilang patigilin. Violation yan, bawal mag-operate. Hanggang hindi mo nagagawa to, hindi ka pwedeng gumawa nito. 'Di ba? Kunyari, meron kang maraming complaints yung laboratory at ni-report ka ng mga tao. Then pwede kang ipasara ng government. Okay? Yung pagpapasara sa'yo, pwedeng permanent or temporary. Kapag temporary lang, big sabihin noon, meron silang pinapaayos sa'yo. Okay? So, kapag naayos mo yan, pwede ka na mag-operate uli. Pero kapag di talaga siya naayos, then, permanent closure na yan. So, the provincial, city, and municipal health officers are enjoined to report to the Bureau of Health Facility Services or the CHD the existence of unlicensed clinical lab or any private party performing laboratory examination without proper license and are violation of these rules and regulation. Okay? So again, lahat ng laboratory should have a license to operate for them to operate. Kapag wala, pwede silang i-report sa government. So, ano ba ang mga physical design consideration? Of course, dapat meron kang appropriate space. Okay? So, ano ba yung space for offices, personal facilities, storage, and conference or library? Of course, you have floor plans. You must review that. Elevations, appropriate usage. Space and functions are related. So, part din ng physical design are your equipment, di ba? Such as the fume hoods, biological safety cabinets. They must be located away from traffic areas and doorways. Proper temperature, base cabinets for laboratory counters, and noise control and install ceiling. So, for the eye wash unit, it must be within 100 feet of the work area. Ano ba yung mga suggested dimension? For the lab counter, it should be at least 2 feet to 6 inches, 2 feet 6 inches. For the lab counter to wall clearance, it must be 4 feet. Lab counter to counter clearance, it must be 7 feet. Desk height, it is 30 inches. Keyboard drawer height, about 25 to 27 inches. Human body standing, about 4 square feet. Human body sitting, 6 square feet. Desk space, about 3 square feet. So, ito yung mga suggested standard dimensions that must be met in the clinical lab. So, for the physical facilities, again, yung mga laboratory, meron siyang size that is required based on the type of services that you're going to offer. So, ito yung minimum size lang. Kapag daw primary lab, at least 10 square meters. Secondary, at least 20 square meters. Tertiary, at least 60 square meters. And then, make sure that you have a separate, enclosed, and adequately ventilated room for microbiology. So, hiwalay ang microbiology lab. Okay, dapat meron siyang sariling area or sariling space. Okay, that is the physical facilities. So, what are the different minimum requirement? So, if you're going to establish a primary category lab, dapat you must have at least a clinical centrifuge, microhematocrit centrifuge, microscope with oil immersion, objective, hemoglobinometer, and differential blood cell counter. For the secondary category, so lahat ng meron sa primary plus refrigerator, photometer, water bath, and timer. For the tertiary category, lahat ng nasa secondary plus incubator, balance, rotator, centrifuge, autoclave, drying oven, biosafety cabin, or its equivalent. So ito yung mga required equipment. Minimum required equipment based on the category of the lab. So under primary, secondary, and tertiary. Now, for the glassware, reagent, and supplies, so all categories of clinical lab shall provide adequate and appropriate glassware, reagent, and supplies necessary to undertake the required services. So, yung mga number of reagent, glassware, and supplies mo, proportion siya dapat sa number of tests being done. Kasi nga naman, definitely, kapag marami kang test na ginagawa, dapat marami ka ring mga glassware, reagent, and supplies. Okay? And of course, the waste management. Sabi ko nga kanina, hindi siya basta-basta tinatapon na lang. Dapat merong company na pupunta sa laboratory mo to collect those medical waste. So there should be a provision for adequate and efficient disposal of waste following guidelines of the Department of Health and the local government. Pagdating naman sa safety, importante rin ang common decontamination agent. So, ito yung dapat na meron ka sa laboratory mo. So, ethylene oxide, glutaraldehyde, halogen peroxide, formalin detergent, phenol, UV radiation, ionizing radiation, and photooxidation. So, paano naman yung heat? Kapag heat, example nito is the oven. So, sometimes you can sterilize the glassware by putting it in an oven. Okay? So, that's an example of heat. And so, these are other decontamination agent that are very basic that you must have in your laboratory. Now, for the safety naman, of course, dapat meron ka dyan mga hazard prevention strategies, diba? So, dito na papasok yung biosafety natin. So, again, meron kang hand washing after every patient contact, clean the surfaces with disinfectant. So, again kapag medtech ka, part talaga ng job mo yung maglinis ng work area. Okay? Kasi nga naman, ito yung mga problema sa mga bagong medtech. Kapag sinabihan sila na magpunas ka ng table, akala nila inuutusan sila, ginagawa silang janitor. Hindi ganon. Okay? Kasi nga naman, part ng trabaho ng medtech ang infection control. And part of infection control is cleaning surface and disinfectants. Hindi yan kayang gawin ng mga janitor. Kasi kapag janitor, ang alam lang niya, magpunas ng basahan. Pero kapag medtech ka, alam mo kung ano ba yung disinfectant na ibubuhos mo doon bago mo siya punasan. Okay? So, part talaga ng job ng medtech ang maglinis. You must clean surfaces with disinfectant. And of course, practice proper hand washing every after patient contact. Avoid unnecessary use of needles and sharps and not recapping. Ano ba yung mga unnecessary use of needles and sharp? For example, wala kang pipette. So, ang ginamit mo is the needle or the syringe bilang replacement ng pipette. So, hindi po pwede yon. Okay, dapat meron kang equipment dapat meron kang adequate glassware. So, dapat yung lab mo must provide a pipette for you para hindi ginagamit ng pipette yung mga syringes. Another thing is proper waste disposal, of course. Immunization for hepatitis, ayan. So, when you're going to work in a lab, required talaga na dapat meron kang vaccine against hepatitis B. No eating and drinking and smoking inside the lab, that is very basic. And of course, the different warning signs or safety signages in your laboratory. For the engineering controls, you must have puncture-proof containers, safety needles that retracts after extraction, biohazard bags, splash guards, volatile liquid carriers, sensor foot control sink, biological safety cabins, and fume hoods. So those are example of engineering controls needed in the lab. Now for the safety, so you must have, again, the PPE, personal protective equipment. So example of that is the non-latex gloves, gowns, lab coat, masks including particle respirators, face shield, protective eyewear, eye wash station, and chemical resistant gloves. Now, for the quality control program, so we're going to have a separate discussion regarding this one. So, meron kang dalawang klase ng quality control. You have internal quality control program and another one is the external quality control. So, for the internal quality control program, so there must be a documented continuous competency assessment program of all lab personnel. So, example ng quality control program internal is the competency assessment of your personnel. So, sabi ko nga, kapag nasa lab ka nagtatrabaho from time to time, bibigyan ka pa rin dapat ng practical exam. So, yung practical exam, hindi lang siya sa school natatapos, pati rin sa workplace. Okay? That is what you call the competency assessment. Kasi nga naman, your supervisor will evaluate you if you are still if your skills are still working properly. Kung marunong ka pa ba magbasa ng mga blood cells. Yun ang example of that. Okay? Kumbaga yung supervisor mo, meron siyang ibibigay na certain test for you to do. Ikaw lang mag-isa gagawa ng test na yun. Kunyari, ang test is CBC. So sa CBC, kailangan mong basahin ang red cells, white blood cell, and platelets. Okay? On your own. Ikaw lang mag-isa. And then dapat yung reading mo is pareho ng reading nung senior medtech handling CBC test. Okay? Kasi nga naman kapag makaiba kayo ng reading, since senior medtech yun, mas matagal siya sa'yo, nagtatrabaho, mas competent siya at specialist siya sa CBC, malamang yung reading niya ay tama, yung reading mo mali. Okay? That is an example of what you call the competency assessment program. Okay? So, ganun talaga. Kasi nga naman, dapat yung mga medtech must be tested kung proficient pa ba siya. Anong gagawin kapag di na siya proficient? Well, the owner of the lab must provide training for the medtech. The program shall provide appropriate and standard laboratory methods, reagents, supplies, and equipment. So, of course, again, that is part of internal quality control. Dapat yung mga reagent equipment mo is at par with the standard. Okay? Hindi yung mga peke, hindi yung mga binibili lang kung saan-saan. Now, in the Philippines kasi, most of the reagents ngayon binibili na sa China. So, of course, ang China kasi, may mga reputable companies naman dyan that actually produce the reagents naman na talagang at par sa mga standard. However, of course, meron din mga companies sa China na hindi at par ang mga reagents sa standards. So, ang Department of Health, ang ginawa nila is, naglabas sila ng listahan ng mga companies that you can actually outsource na pwede pagkuhanan ng mga reagents and chemicals. So, kapag wala sila doon, hindi sila FDA approved, di ba? Walang approval from the government, then definitely, you should not purchase that reagent or chemical. Ito yung tinatawag natin na substandard, di ba? Substandard yung mga yan. Okay? So, there shall be program for proper maintenance of all equipment. So, part na niya ng internal quality control program, yung maintenance mo, preventive maintenance of the equipment, calibration, etc. And of course, repair, di ba? Kapag nasira siya. The program shall also provide QC, reference material. When you say QC, this is quality control reference material. So, ano ba yung quality control reference material na yan? For example, kanina, sabi ko nga, you're going to test for blood glucose. You want to test the machine if the machine can still read blood glucose. So, meron ka doong reference sample. Diba? Meron kang sample for the high, sample for the low, and sample for the normal. Okay, that is an example of a quality control reference material. Now, for the external naman, kapag external, ibig sabihin niyan is, you're participating in what you call the EQAS or External Quality Assurance Program. Okay? So, yung mga specimen na yung magagaling yun sa labas. Saan nagagaling? Sa National Reference Lab. So, for example, the test is microbiology test. Kapag microbiology test, ang National Reference Lab natin is RITM. So, yung RITM or the Research Institute for Tropical Medicine will give you a specimen for microbiology testing. And then, you're going to test that. And then, after some time, you're going to send the results back to RITM. And then, yung RITM, mag-send back din sila ng result nila. So, dapat pareho kayo ng result. Okay? Kasi kapag magkaiba kayo ng result, then definitely, ang problema dyan is, definitely, ang tama dyan is RITM. Ikaw yung mali. So, may mali sa laboratory niyo, may mali sa procedure, or yung mismong staff ang mali. Okay? Next is satisfactory performance rating given by the National Reference Lab shall be one of the criteria for renewal of license. So, importante yun. So, dapat tama yung performance rating mo para yung license to operate nyo must be renewed. And the refusal to participate in the EQAS or EQAP program given by the NRL shall be one of the basis for suspension, revocation of the license of the laboratory. So, requirement talaga siya na you must be able to participate in the external quality control program.